Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is the old world architecture of Melbourne and Sydney. I recently got this book for Christmas from my daughter, The Secret History of Human Resets, The Great Mud Flood of 1834, the 1587 Plasma Event, The Biblical Flood, and Other Historical Reset Theories by Donnie Davis. And I highly recommend this book to you simply because it covers so many topics that most of us in the truther community are interested in. And I do also want to point out that as I was paging through it when I first got it, I happened to notice that I was mentioned in this book regarding the seam at the North Pole right next to John Levi. So I was like, woohoo, I made it. Anyway, has nothing to do with this video, but I just wanted to share it. But what this book did though was it really made me want to start looking more into some of the architecture that is not in the US because I tend to focus on the United States just because it seems to be that's where a lot of the cover up seems to be because places like Europe is allowed to have an old world, but the United States is not supposed to have an old world, at least not according to their narrative. And Australia is another one of those places where, like the United States, they want to almost look at that as like a new world in and of itself. They don't want to admit that there was a prior civilization there. So let's look at some of the architecture that you will find in Australia, which, by the way, I have to mention was it was a penal colony. It was discovered, I believe, by James Cook, but it was used as a penal colony by Great Britain. And so, yeah, it was basically a land of prisoners. And there were also gold miners here. And the narrative is that all of these prisoners and gold miners were somehow able to just build these wonderful, lavish buildings, which I call foul on. So this is the building that really catches my eye. Out of all of the ones that I'm going to be sharing today, this is the one that was just like pow when I saw it. This is Anthony Hordern and Sons, and it's called the Palace Emporium. This is in, well, I don't, you know what? I don't even know if it is still there, but Sydney, Australia. And this was supposedly built to be a department store. So, for some reason, in the late 1800s, shortly after Australia really started becoming populated, they needed some sort of massive department store because they obviously had so many goods in order to sell here. I mean, look at the size of this place compared to the cars and the people. And it's 6 stories, I believe. One, two, three, four, five, six. Yeah, it's 6 stories. And this is not your average box building. It's absolutely stunning. And I'm going to say it again. It's enormous. This is the Wikipedia page for Anthony Hordern and Sons. And so what you can see from over here is that there were a number of locations for this. And the Wikipedia article itself is very, very confusing, and it's hard to make sense out of it when it comes to talking about this particular building. So let's just see what it has there. This is coming from another view. And that's the photo that I just showed. So yes, the Anthony Hordern Palace Emporium was once the largest department store in the world, because this was necessary in the late 1800s. 6 stories, and what would that be? At least a city block long? That must be another one of the buildings. I believe this is what the entrance looked like. They used Italian marble, apparently, for this entrance. That was like 1953. And, oh, this is just the inspiration for the company crest. So let's see what this Wikipedia page says about this place. And again, I'm going to tell you that it's not easy to make sense of it in the way that it was written. Anthony Horton and Sons was a major department store in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, with 52 acres or 21 hectares of retail space. 52 acres of retail space. Anthony Horton's was once the largest department store in the world. The historic Anthony Horton building, which was located on a block bounded by George Street, Liverpool, Pitt, and Goulburn Streets on what was a small hill called Brickfield Hill in the Sydney Central Business District, was controversially demolished in 1986. Okay, so it is not there anymore, to make way for the World Square development, which always have the ugliness replacing beauty, right? So let's just, yeah, and like I said, the business itself was founded in 1823. I don't think that's when that particular building was built, though. But let's just read a little bit of the history. It says the business was originally established by a free immigrant from England, Anthony Horton, in 1823 as a drapery shop. He was the founding member of the Horton family in Australia. A further large menswear store was in Upper George Street, and Hortons also operated one of the largest mail order businesses in Australia. So quite the entrepreneur. The business remained in family hands for a century, and a substantial 6-story building was opened by them in 1905, called the Palace Emporium. I wish I could find some sort of reference as to when this was built, because it, as far as I've seen, hopefully as we go through this I'll see it, I haven't seen a date that it was actually built. It just says that it was opened by them in 1905. But as I mentioned, the main entrance was completely fitted out in imported Italian marble. And it says one of its advertising slogans was that it sold anything from a needle to an anchor. Because yes, we need infinite supplies in that time period. So I just want to point out here that it was located on a block on a small hill called Brickfield Hill. Okay, so that's where this store is, on a small hill called Brickfield Hill. Let's go down here. On the 10th of July, 1901, the Haymarket premises was destroyed by fire. So it appears that this was the original building at that location, and this, they say that this one burned down, and that massive building that I just showed you is what took its place, because, you know, there's always got to be a fire narrative, right? So business was resumed almost immediately in the exhibition building, Prince Alfred Park, and a new building, New Palace Emporium, or senior store, erected on the site of the original Brickfield Hill store in 1905. And it says a further story was added a few years later. So from what I'm understanding here, up here it told us that this department store was opened in 1905. And down here it is telling us that, I think I went too far. Okay. Over here it's telling us there was a fire in 1901 in the old building, so it wasn't even there in 1901. And it says they erected the building in 1905. So that certainly couldn't have taken very long to build if they erected it in 1905 and opened the store in 1905. I mean, even if you say, oh, well, no, it was definitely longer than that, you know. Well, okay, the fire was 1901. So at the very least, you know, you figure after the cleanup effort and everything, you have maybe 3.5 years to build this, and not only to build it, but to get the entire inside done, to ship in all of the things that they're going to be selling, and to get all of the vendors to come in, and to rent out this massive area. And, you know, if you look in the vicinity, it really doesn't look like there's a whole lot of people who are living around there who would really fill those stands, who would fill the stores. Who's going to shop there? there's like a handful of people walking around. So, yeah, if you look at it, to me, this is definitely this was something that was taken over by inheritors. This building was already there when they got to Australia. And yes, they might have done something to the bottom because it looks like, there are storefronts here, but that's about all that they actually did. Okay, and they did add this fabulous lettering on top of this beautiful facade. They did that as well. But that's it. Next building that I wanted to take a look at in Sydney is the Queen Victoria building. And I'm not going to comprehensively go into the histories of these buildings. I just really want to show them to you and to try to just figure out how we're supposed to believe that these buildings were built by gold miners and prisoners in a penal colony. But this is a Queen Victoria building in Sydney, New South Wales. Another beautifully intricate building. We've got domes here. Are they copper? They could possibly be because they're that greenish color now. And then down here, it's very similar to the Palace Emporium. They've got, this kind of these storefronts on the bottom. So yeah, some renovation went on down here. But I imagine this is all one door here. I can't see because of the canopy. Maybe, let me see. Can I get in closer? No, that's a different one. Let's see. Actually, yeah, I'm just trying to see if this here is a bottom. No, I don't think that is one whole doorway. I was thinking that was an entire doorway. Anyway, let's go back. It's just where it is. This is, I guess that's the old market, maybe? Maybe that's what used to be there. Got a close-up of the domes and beautiful artwork on the facade. Wow, look at the size of that compared to the people. And again, this is another one that is used as a marketplace in the same city. How many of these massive marketplaces did they need? This, when I get it on Wikipedia, it does not let me zoom in like I would like to. But yeah. And so this is 1900. So this gives us a good view. So we've got, I think this is the Sydney City Hall down here, or Sydney Town Hall, if I'm not mistaken. Here's another street view, and we've got an idea of the number of people that were moving around at that time, living in that area. We've got the horse and buggies, because yes, all these horse and buggy people, they're the ones that built this, apparently, in the muddy roads. And apparently they all needed not only this marketplace, but they also needed the Palace Emporium because they've got lots of shopping to do, don't they? Wow. Absolutely stunning. They just absolutely don't make things like they used to, that's for sure, no matter who built them. We are way less advanced than what we used to be. Wow. Yep. It's a definite need for the 19th century. Okay, so the page for this says the Queen Victoria Building is a heritage listed late 19th century building in New South Wales, Australia, in the Sydney Central Business District in the state of New South Wales, Australia. Designed by the architect George McRae, the Romanesque Revival building was constructed between 1893 and 1898, so 5 years for that gloriousness to be built. Okay, and is 30 meters wide by 190 meters long. The domes, this is kind of funny. The domes were built by Ritchie Brothers, a steel and metal company that also built trains, trams, and farm equipment. So they're definitely a very talented company. If not only trains, trams, and farm equipment, they can also build these beautiful Romanesque style domes. Okay. The building fills a city block bounded by George Market, York, and Druitt Streets, designed as a marketplace. Sure. It was used for a variety of other purposes. I'm sure it was by the original people who built it. Underwent remodeling and suffered decay until its restoration and returned to its original use in the late 20th century. You always have to wonder what they mean by restoration, because sometimes what they say isn't exactly what they actually mean. Next, we're going to take a look at the Sydney Town Hall, and I believe that's the one that was just visible at the edge of the street in one of the other photos. So here it says an early version of the City of Sydney coat of arms on the portico facade of the town hall. So that's the coat of arms. Okay. And there it is in all its glory. The That's the word I'm looking for. The materials used for the building are very similar to that of the one that we just looked at, the Queen Victoria building. It's just an old engraving of it. Sydney Town Hall at night, inauguration of the Commonwealth of Australia in 1901. Oh, wow. They had it all lit up. This is not it. It just says the Sydney Town Hall was inspired by the Hotel de Ville in Paris, France. And it's talking about the roofs. This is another one we should look at sometime. Look at that. Beautiful. Here's the town hall here, and next to it is St. Andrew's Cathedral. Over here, we've got the horse and buggies, we've got the blurs. You know, people always say, oh, well, the reason that you can't see people in the photos is because, you know, because of the long exposure time. Well, no, you do see blurs when there are people. So there are times when you see absolutely no blurs at all, and that's because there are no people. Tower and the clock. Look at that. What is that? Just looking at it, wondering if it has anything to do with the Illuminati, since it's got the triangular shape to it. Definitely looks like Antiquitech up here. Kind of backing up, just the same view, but backed up a little bit. You can get more of it. You can definitely see the mud flood windows down here too. Right here, you've got, see if it's gonna, I can't move it up anymore. Nope, it's not gonna let me. Well, a little bit, but you can see the mud flood windows here, and down here, it won't let me back up anymore, possibly an original entrance level. I think I was able to see that in one of the other photographs. That's the interior of the Centennial Hall. Look at that. Amazing. The Centennial Hall with the grand organ. Domed ceiling with the domes made by the people who make trains and farm equipment. Ah, this is the one, the southern facade of the building. This was the one I was talking about. So if you look here, this definitely looks to me like this would have been an original entrance. And you've got all these mud flood windows over here on the side. So, you know, chances are there are more levels to this building underground. This is not all that there is to it. Cleaning the clock face of Sydney Town Hall. Okay. And that's nothing interesting. Next, we're going to take a look at the University of Sydney. What I'm guessing is the main campus. So right here. That says the University of Sydney as viewed from Parramatta Road in the early 1970s. So that looks very, very muddy in my opinion. And then we've got the horse and buggies down here and these people who certainly don't seem like they had anything to do with the building of this. The Sydney University Regiment. That looks Charles Perkins Center. They must have modernized that somewhere. The Quad Building. It kind of looks like the combination, in my opinion, of a cathedral and a castle. You've got these turrets here. Very castle-like. That definitely looks like a castle on the inside. It reminds me of when I watch Merlin, when they're inside Uther's castle. That's what it looks like to me. And you've got the black and white flooring, which makes me think, okay, is that Masonic in nature? I think it very well could be. Because, just the Freemasons have been around much longer. That entire organization, even though did not go by the name Freemason, the cult, the religion that it follows, antediluvian from pre-flood times. But that's for a video another day. This is the quadrangle. That is humongous. You can see just from the size of looking at it in comparison with the people there. Got some more of these castle-like turrets here. That's the McLaren Hall. Equally beautiful. Look at the entire campus. It almost looks like a modern day World's Fair, except maybe not as full as it would have been, but the entire campus is just gorgeous. Sydney Pharmacy School, lots of different buildings, also very castle-like. The Sydney Conservatorium of Music. Sydney Medical School. Looks like some Antiquitech is going on up here. The Molonglo Observatory. Do not know what that is. And that looks like a modern building, and so we are not interested in that one, at least I'm not. I've been trying to read through here to see if they give a time frame for the building, at least of the main building, and I don't really see anything. And that's the issue with a lot of these buildings that I'm looking at today, is that you can't find a definite date for when they were built. We do know at the very least from the photo that we looked at, they're from at least the 1870s, because the one photo was taken in 1870. But it tells us here that the university was inaugurated on the 11th of October, 1852, in the big schoolroom of what is now Sydney Grammar School. So I'm assuming that the large building was not around at that point in time. But here it says on the 27th of February, 1858, the university, not the universe, received a royal charter from Queen Victoria, giving degrees conferred by the university rank and recognition equal to those given by universities in the United Kingdom. I'm wondering if by 1858, that then it was built. If that's the case, it only took 6 years to build that massive building. But again, we also know that 1870 it was already there. Now I'm moving on to Melbourne, and this was the original building that caught my eye in Melbourne. The Oriental Bank, built in 1857, and it looks like something straight out of Rome. I went on the Wikipedia page for the Oriental Bank, but since there are so many different locations of the Oriental banks, it was very hard to find any good information about the building of this. But it does say here that it was built in 1857. But just looking right here at this photograph here, again, seems very muddy to me. It also it could just be the coloring of the photograph, but it does appear to show some age here. And, we've got the horse and buggy people here again with a beautiful building in the mud. Now, right here, what do you think this is? You might look at this and think that definitely has something to do with the government. Could it be a government seat? Could it be a parliament? Could it be even, I don't even know, something that some diplomats may stay at? No, this is actually the old fish market on Flinders Street. Because if you haven't noticed from the marketplaces in Sydney, Australia doesn't do anything small. They go out with everything. And this is no different, because why wouldn't you want a fish market of this size and grandeur? So here's another view of this fish market on a dirty, muddy street with some painted signs slapped on the beautiful architecture. Not a whole lot of people there. So either there weren't a lot of people living there at the time, or nobody really liked fish. So why would you need a fish market of that size anyway? Next, we have Scott's Hotel in Melbourne, and this was built in 1860, apparently. Not sure what year this photograph was taken. It looks to have been taken at least in the early 1900s. I find it interesting that, at least from the looks of the photo, everyone seemed to wear black, or at least very dark colors during those times. Again, you just might not be able to see because of it being black and white photographs, but that's just an observation that I made. But yes, here we have this intricate architecture in a building that was built in 1860. And apparently Melbourne had enough visitors that they needed a beautiful, lavish hotel like this. So next we have the Federal Hotel Coffee Palace in Melbourne. It was built in 1895, apparently to coincide with the Centennial Exposition that was going on there. That's what they say. That's a very likely story. To me, it's just one more leftover building from another civilization that they didn't have time to ruin and knock down at the time, so they just claim to have built it for the exposition. Because why not? If people are going to believe it, go for it. So here you've got this beautiful building with Antiquitech, with cupolas, with this astonishing architecture, what looks like mudflood windows down here. And yes, we've got just a few people, looks like a wagon right here, and we've got the muddy roads. Let's take a look at what this article has to say about this, though. So it's the Federal Hotel Coffee Palace in 1895. Oh, I'm sorry, this picture was taken in 1895. So the palace was built, well, the coffee palace was built in 1888. So built in 1888 to coincide with Melbourne's Centennial Exhibition, the Federal Hotel and Coffee Palace was one of the largest and most opulent hotels in the world. Guests included Alexander Graham Bell, Mark Twain, Herbert Hoover, and General Douglas MacArthur. The first floors housed impressive dining, reading, smoking, and billiard rooms, with the remaining 5 stories given over to luxurious guest apartments. The interior was so impressive that the building became a tourist attraction in its own right. If that would actually be the true timeline, like, what are we doing? What we have declined so much as a society when you look at how they claim that these people lived during this time. What are we doing? Anyway, so the next one that we're going to take a look at is the Australia building. So yes, this is the Australia building, built in 1889. Again, we've got some other buildings next to it that have these painted signs slapped on them. We've got the muddy streets, and of course we have these inheritors down here dressed to the nines. And we have what looks to be a pretty worn building for the time period, at least from the looks of the photo. I actually want to go back here, because okay, I was just looking at this. So is that the building itself? It kind of looks different. Just wondering if this is renovations to it, what they're doing in there. But I want to go back because I don't know that that's the same building, unless it's just from a different side. Yeah, it might be coming from the side of it over here. Just my curiosity going. Next, we have the Colonial Mutual Life Building. Is that an insurance company? They needed that, apparently. Look at that. Look at that entrance over there. I'm assuming that would be, if it's not the main entrance now, it once was. We've got this huge arch. Looks like some storefronts maybe down here. I don't know. If they rented out areas? Seemingly more populated, but then again, it is later in the timeline because we've actually got automobiles going on here. But it says the Equitable Company set themselves the ambition of constructing the grandest building in the Southern Hemisphere for their Melbourne headquarters, which, with a 5-year construction and £500,000 price tag, this wonderful building may well have been. Taken over by Colonial Mutual in 1923, it would serve as their grand offices for 30 years, until it was rebuilt in 1974 for office space. So, taken down for office space because there's just not enough room in there for offices. I mean, can't you see that? We already talked about the Oriental Bank. Here we've got the Cafe Australia. That's the interior of that building. And the Paris Crystal Cafe Hotel, another one that is no longer there in Melbourne. And the last thing that I'm going to look at today with you is the Kew Asylum. And it's just another one of those lunatic asylums that looks like a massive palace. So here we go. And that picture itself does not even give a good image of how big this place actually is. There we go. That's an etching, but that is more like it. So let's see what we can find out about this lunatic asylum. So this huge lunatic asylum is a decommissioned psychiatric hospital. Oh, is that it? No, I think that was another one. Okay. It was made to house the growing number of lunatics, inebriates, and idiots in the colony of Victoria. They must have had a lot of them in order to need a building of that size. Down here, it says, designed to be elegant, beautiful, yet substantial, and to be viewed as a magnificent asylum for the insane, with the aim of portraying Melbourne as a civilized and benevolent city, whilst avoiding the jail-like appearance of other asylums. Yep, that's why they used it. Definitely not because they found the building and put that to its use. There's another photo that I found, and that is just one portion of the asylum itself. I think that they probably would have had a hard time fitting the entire thing onto one photograph. Let's see, here was one I just saw. Kind of see it from the hilltop. What is this one? Can't really see much there. Well, that's okay. Let's go back and read a little bit more about it before we go. Just out of curiosity, let's read about the patients in the admission process. So many of Kew's early patients were transferred from Yarra Bend Asylum and Carlton Lunatic Asylum and were housed in the two main wings, men in the right wing, women in the left. The wards were dormitory style and were divided by patient type, male, female, paying, pauper, manageable, refractory. The area of the women's wards was smaller due to the laundries and drying courtyards being located on the women's side of the asylum. Admission process. Under the Lunacy Statute of 1867, Lunacy Acts from 1880 to 1928, and Mental Hygiene Act of 1933, people could be admitted to the asylum by a number of means. at the request of a friend, relative, or acquaintance with medical certificates written by 2 medical professionals. Okay. Any lunatic person found wandering at large or not under proper care and control could be brought before 2 justices who could order the person's removal to an asylum. Any prisoner of the Crown thought to be a lunatic could be removed from a jail to an asylum, and voluntary boarders were those who requested that they be admitted for a mutually agreed period of time. And while earlier it mentioned that they were divided by male and female, there were also children there. In the early days of Q Asylum, the distinction between lunatics and idiots or imbeciles was not made. Therefore, many wards of the state, difficult children, and children with intellectual disability were housed with the adults at Q. Doesn't sound very safe to me. By 1879, nearly 600 children, representing a quarter of all inmates, were accommodated in various institutions in Victoria. 600 children in asylums in Victoria. You have to wonder why. In the 1880s, the government decided that a separate building should be built to accommodate child inmates. You think? And let's see. It says the Zox Commission recommended the Yarra Bend Asylum site as appropriate for buildings for imbecile children. There's such nice vocabulary they used. And then it just says, although the idiot asylum only admitted children, many of those children remained in residence at the cottages as adults. So just a little bit of background of the Q Asylum that was there. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this walk through some of the beautiful old architecture of Sydney and Melbourne. And that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work, you can join my YouTube membership. I hope you have a great day.